Hi, this is just a heads up that this video isn't for kids and is targeted towards the older side of the fandom. Again, I don't think the younger side would be interested in this, but you never know. Alright, I hope you enjoyed the video. I met Vincent Tong and he knows about and has a copy of my Kai drawing from the last video. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. So, hey, I've been procrastinating on this Lloyd video for a while. Sorry about that. I know I made a joke about Marvel Rivals getting in the way of my Ninjago motivation, but I swear that stupid game isn't why I took so long to get to making this. For the most part, that is. Okay, as always, I don't really know what else to say in this section, so let's just jump straight into taking notes. Like the last 3 times I did this video is going to split into parts. This is going to be a little different just because Lloyd, has had 3 redesigns compared to everybody else's 2 redesigns. The first will be Lloyd's kid design, the next will be him after he ages up, the next will be him post redesign, and finally we have the rendered bust. Next is an abridged version of our vocab recap. In case you forgot, I'll be throwing around some words, so in case you don't know what they mean, canon describes an event that has happened within a story, such as Lloyd being aged up by magic tea. A headcanon is just a bit of characterization or world building that the author hasn't established in canon, but a fan may come up with on their own. For example, I like to headcanon Lloyd has cat-like pupils due to his Oni heritage. Next, a warning! These humanizations are going to be based on my own headcanons on the ninja. I'm about to share my own personal opinion on things, so if you don't rock with somebody's headcanon being different from your own, this isn't the video for you. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's get into the video. Is now a bad time to reveal that Lloyd's my least favorite ninja? Hey! Stop, I'm allowed to have my opinion. Remember that note from the intro of the video. I'm allowed to have my own opinion. Okay, I don't hate him. I actually like him a lot better than I did before the redesign. He was just so bland from like rebooted to the Oni trilogy, so I just never resonated with him, you know? Again, don't hate him. I don't even dislike him, but I hope that somewhat explains away a factor in why it took so long to get to this video. Now, let's get into age headcanons, which is really messy when it comes to Lloyd. I'm going to cover the basics right now just to, get this over and done with. In my mind, the pilots of Season 7 take place within a span of 4 years. Of course, the pilots aren't really relevant to Lloyd since he was introduced in Season 1, but in my head, Season 1 takes place half a year-ish after the pilots, and Season 2 follows not too long after. Seasons 1 to 2 take place over the course of a year. Season 3 takes place a year later, Season 4 takes place half a year after that, and then Seasons 4 to 7 happen within the same year. There's a debate on how old the ninja were when they started, in general, but I think we've gotten a semi-canon answer about Lloyd's age from his original voice actress, Jillian Michaels. In an interview, she stated that Lloyd starts off at 10 and then ages up to 14-ish. Personally, I headcanon Lloyd to be 11 at the start of the series and was physically aged up to 13 to 14-ish. I feel like there's a small enough gap between the semi-canon quote-unquote 10 age and my headcanon of 11 to get away with keeping it that way. I have a reason for being stubborn on my stance on him being 11 though, I swear. That being said, I headcanon him as mentally 11 to 15 and physically 14 to 18 throughout the original run of the series. Moving on, let's talk about a slightly older Lloyd. Honestly, there isn't as much to say. A lot of my pre-age up headcanons line up with his post-age up headcanons. I feel like he's still one of the shortest ninja on the team, but not the shortest. This will appear in a second, probably, but I like to imagine his eyes turned gold after he unlocked his true potential, but then they reverted to green after he lost his golden power. A lot of other people also have this headcanon, and I've seen it be referred to as traffic light eyes, which I love. I'd like to think his Oni traits started to show a little bit more once he aged up, but there wasn't anything too crazy. Maybe some sharper teeth, possibly longer and sharper ears because long ears are based, but that's about it. What else can I talk about? You know, the show puts so much focus on Lloyd that they cover a lot of what I'd usually say for headcanons. Unresolved issues with Moro. Well, he's in Dragon's Rising now, so those unresolved issues may not be unresolved for long. Trained to be a master in Season 7 with no resolution. He has a bunch of pupils now and has no idea how to teach them. We're covering a lot of unresolved stuff that I would usually complain about. Or like, make headcanons for. I mean, I'm not complaining, this is great. I think a lot of my lack of headcanons concerning seasons 2 to 7 come from how one-note he was. A lot of his stuff with Garmadon was okay, but it wasn't extraordinary. Especially since Garmadon was the more interesting of the duo, I'm just saying. Sorry, I don't mean to dog on Lloyd in a video about him, but he really was just really bland, and I'm actually really happy with what they've been doing with him. Speaking of which, I feel like this headcanon is like obvious, but like you'd be surprised by how many people don't think this way, but I headcanon Lloyd as East Asian, or like half East Asian, I guess, because of his Oni and dragon stuff. But I'm always surprised by how many people just assume he's white? Not to go on a tangent, but I feel like out of all the ninja, Lloyd is the one that's most clearly Asian. You probably saw in the speed paint, but I do like making it so Lloyd has hints of some Oni features right from the start. Like I mentioned earlier, I like to imagine he has cat-like pupils, but I also like to imagine he has pointed ears and hints of some fangs. It's not technically an Oni trait, more a side effect of the Great Devourer, but like a lot of people, I also like to imagine Garmadon passed down his red eyes to Lloyd. But I like to imagine that as Lloyd keeps training, the red starts to slowly be overtaken by green. His eyes aren't entirely green by the time the final battle hits, but it's definitely overtaken a large portion of his iris. I know a lot of people make his Oni and dragon traits super visible, and while I always find it fun to see Lloyd with horns and a tail, I feel like it doesn't fit within canon if they're visible before the Oni trilogy. I especially feel this way just because they can't be excused as traits passed down from Garmadon, like red eyes and vaguely pointed ears and teeth can. I mean, Garmadon doesn't really have a tail or horns, unless you already include them in your own Wu and Garmadon designs. Then ignore that entire ramble. I just personally feel like, in canon, he doesn't actually have them. Anyways, my point is, nobody suspected Wu, Garmadon, and Lloyd were Oni or Dragon, so why would there be any upfront physical indicators that they were, if that makes sense? Again, I do really like seeing Garmadon, Wu, and Lloyd looking less human. That's just my 2 cents on why I don't personally draw Lloyd like that. His blandness, thankfully, didn't cross over to the Oni trilogy. I actually really enjoy where they took his character from this point onwards. He's actually allowed to be upset in the general, more kid-friendly feel we got in the 11-minute era really complemented his character. He was a kid forced to grow up way too quickly, and it really felt like he was allowed to finally be just that. Anyways, timeline stuff. Personally, I like to think seasons 8 to 16 take place over the span of 3 to 4-ish years. Season 8 canonically takes place a year after season 7. Season 9 takes place a week later. There seems to be a gap between seasons 9 and 10. I'd say at most it's been half a year and at least a month. Then the 11-minute era takes place half a year to a whole year later, and the seasons up until Crystallize seem to take place basically one after the other with little gaps in between. And then, of course, Crystallize takes place exactly 1 year later. So Lloyd starts off mentally 16 and ends up mentally 19 to 20-ish. Also, the reason I was adamant about keeping my Lloyd headcanon as 11 was so he could be 16 by the time the Oni trilogy takes place, which would line up with his movie counterpart and have the movie and trilogy line up a bit, you know? Does that make sense? Moving on, I headcanon that the merge takes place 2 years after Crystallized, and then the season starts up 3 years after the merge. That adds up to 5 years in total, so that makes Lloyd 24, 25-ish. I didn't really bother to draw post-merge Lloyd, but I like to think his hair is a little longer than it was during the 11-minute era. I don't know why. I just like to imagine he let his hair grow out a bit. All of my footage for this is just gone. Well, okay, not all of it. Yeah, I still have me rendering the drawing, but it's just poof, gone. I don't know where it went. My bad. Everything about this part of the video kind of spiraled a bit. I restarted this entire bust. I like this version better, but I don't know. This is editing, Mika. Sorry. Let's continue with the video. Honestly, I really like that Lloyd doesn't wear gloves in his 11-minute era base gi. I don't know what it is about it, but it's just really fun to have a bit more diversity in the group's gi designs. And since he doesn't have gloves on, I can only assume he doesn't have any arm wraps, so I made his gi sleeves a little looser. Actually, not a little, I made his left sleeve super loose. I also really love what I'm assuming is his leather sleeve, but looking at it on the minifigure, it looks like it'd be really hard to move in. So I added a gap at his elbow to make movement more natural, if that makes sense. Also, this isn't my first attempt at drawing a bust for Lloyd. I don't know, I just didn't like how the line art turned out. The pose was too similar to Cole's, so I just scrapped it and restarted. There's no shame in restarting, I'm just saying. What else can I talk about? I don't think I ever expanded on the busts I drew for each design. For younger Lloyd, I just drew him with red eyes. I drew pre-redesigned Lloyd with his golden eyes, green eyes, possessed, and his aged up look from season 6. And then post-redesign Lloyd, I drew with his elemental powers, making his eyes glow, his stupid Prime Empire character, which I butchered entirely, and then his purple eyes from Crystallize. I was going to draw him in his Oni form, but his face shape was pretty distinguishable from normal figures. Like, the most I would say changed for the humanization video would be that he grew claws that disappeared with his Oni form. I do like to imagine his fangs become more Oni-like after Crystallized, and I'm on the fence about giving him horns. But if I were to give him horns, they'd end up being pretty easy to hide under his bangs since Frack didn't seem to suspect Lloyd being an Oni in Dragons Rising Season 3. Then again, he might just think anything going on with Lloyd is just something he shouldn't pry about, which, like, it isn't. That's fair. Also, I didn't talk about this earlier, but I really like the headcanon that Lloyd bleaches his hair. I don't personally use it, but I've seen a lot of people give him brown roots peeking out. It's fun, explains the discrepancy of both parents having brown hair and him having blonde, even if we know that Wu had blonde hair, so it was obviously just a recessive gene. It fits with him going to Darklies. Anyways, not much else to say. Hopefully I feel better about this bust than I did the last one. And as a little itty bitty treat, here's the original bust I did for the video. Not too proud of it, but in case any of you were curious how it turned out. And that's it! Thank you so much for watching. As a treat, here's a little height chart of all the ninja. Also, keep your eye out because I may or may not have gotten these busts of the ninja printed, and I might be testing them out as stickers. Maybe keep an eye out on my page if you're interested in that. Okay, moving on. I am still interested in continuing the series. I'd especially like to work on Wildfire, Sora, and Heron, especially since I kind of met Aaron's voice actor at Fan Expo and didn't realize it until I got home. I was too nervous meeting Kai's voice actor that I couldn't bring myself to process anybody else around me. I'm so sorry. Anyways, I'm just bringing that up since I want to make Aaron's humanization before I go to the next Fan Expo. For no reason in particular. Again, thank you so much for watching. Do you have any headcanons on Lloyd? Do you despise him for being bland, like I did when I was younger? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I make art and commentary videos, and your support would mean the world to me. My Etsy, where I sell stickers, art prints, button pins, and acrylic charms, can be found in the description below, alongside all my other socials. I believe that's all, so I'll see you all later. Bye!